Okay, guys, let's take a couple of minutes here and talk about some of the advantages that transitioning service members can get, some of the pros by going to a government entity, be it the federal government, some form of public service, maybe at the state level. Chris, I'm going to throw it to you. What are the good things that can happen for a service member by taking public employment?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's lots of options here too, right? Think CIA, FBI, those types of that. Now, again, many times there's a process, and I'm going to start with the downside. The downside is the process generally takes so long to get any government job.
Right.
But the great thing is that it's very similar structure. You're walking into something that shouldn't feel unfamiliar. The players are a little different. The structures and the gradings might be a little different, but you're going to be able to get in and figure out that system and figure out what you need to do to succeed pretty quickly. So, and the great thing is many times you could do this and do reserves at the same time. So, right. Because the governments they have been around a lot longer and have dealt with military employees and work under a similar construct as say UCMJ, it could really benefit you as you go into these organizations where you could still have one foot in the Guard Reserves and one foot in the government. And Jason knows this better than I do in terms of the benefits later on in life when you retire as to what impact that could have.
Absolutely. And, the retirement aspect is pretty big with regard to government employment now. We're not in the 1950s anymore where every company offered a pension and all of that stuff and people stayed at their jobs. Now, I'll tell you that as far as veterans are concerned, typically we're going to have a longer tenure with an employer if everything is jiving well. We don't job hop as much. But the retirement aspect or pensions from the federal side, which is FERS, the Federal Employee Retirement System, or if you have some sort of a public retiree system like a PERS, those are great options, and they often will have a lower threshold on your vesting. So instead of waiting 20 years in the military, you might only have to wait 5 years in order to be vested. Now, obviously, it's going to pay less, right, at 5 years than if you stayed in for 20, but it's nice to have that, comfort of knowing that you'll have an extra kick coming in. So that's definitely something that you want to look at. I will say that with government organizations, it's also often the government organization is the biggest employer, whether you're in your city, the city government is big. You're in your county, the county government is big. Your state, the state government as an employer is huge. The federal government is huge. So these are gigantic organizations with a lot of folks. And I'm going to throw in one more pro, and then I'll kick it back to you, Randy.
Sure.
Is in this one, I think, at least to me, I really, really like, is at both typically at 3 levels of government: county, state, and federal. Those 3 will often have military and veteran focused conduits. So you can leave the military and come into an organization in which you work with the same type of people that you've been around, only wearing a veteran hat instead of their service hat, right? So there is something comforting about working around people that have chewed some of the same dirt, and you can have frank conversations with, and you're not worried about offending somebody. So with that, let's kick it back to you, Randy.
Yeah, no, those are great points. One additional tip I want to throw out there to the folks watching this is kind of do an assessment of what your family has going on. I think that government employment is good in most cases, if not the vast majority of cases, for health benefits. So if you have a member of your family that has unique health challenges and requires a very good quality insurance plan, that might be might be the opportunity for you. Sure, salaries tend to be a little bit lower, but benefits go a long way in managing the family budget. So kind of take a look at your family dynamics, and maybe that makes sense. And then to Jason's point, utilization of military skills. Public employment by definition has a public mission, and we're used to doing that in the military. So you get an alignment there, and you can use some of those skills to better the community. So I think those would be my two pros that I would see from public employment. Turning it around, there's cons too. I think the biggest one we've already touched on is salaries. They tend to be a little bit less. So make sure you're understanding exactly how long it takes to promote, not only just what your salary is on day one, but how long it's going to take you to move up that ladder, because it can be time consuming.
Yeah. Hey, Randy, is it a little bit less than what people, it might, for after having been out for as long as we have and have done the things we do. I mean, I could tell you I was looking to finish my career of going back into the military in some GS capacity.
Right.
And I couldn't pay my mortgage on what they were offering. That's a different perspective than when you're transitioning from the military. I've found a lot of the, especially city jobs, to be relatively decent paying versus the military. However, you always got the cost of living aspect. That is it really more, or are you ending up with less in your paycheck as a result of living in the Bay Area, for example?
Yeah, that's part of it. And I think taxes, play a role too. In the military, in most circumstances, we have BAH and BAS, which is not taxed. And then civilian employment, regardless of what that looks like, even if it's in the public sector or private sector, you're going to generally pay taxes on all of your income in most cases. So yeah, you're right on, Chris. Also bear in mind, based off this conversation today, when you go into the government, you're going to have limited ability to innovate and limited flexibility. So if you're kind of leaving the military with that mind, like, hey, I want to be creative, I want to try something new, the government might be a con. It might not be for you because they're not interested as much in innovation and flexibility as, say the Bay Area is, or Silicon Valley.
I'm going to double down on that, but as I'm older and wiser, and I'm, for the first time in my life, not working a 60, 70-hour work week, maybe you don't get your innovation kick from that government job. You get it outside of the government job because you're going to have another 40 hours in that week to actually do something innovative and creative. And so the balance of, dealing with, what I would say is boredom and lack of speed on things which are important things to me. It drove me crazy in the military. It would drive me crazy if I was working for the government, or the government opportunities that are available to me now. But at the same time, if you could balance that with, hey, I got this side gig and I'm flexing my entrepreneurial or my innovation muscles on the hours outside of this very steady, predictable 40-hour work week that the government gives me, that could be both a con and a pro.
Right. Mm-hmm. Jason, what do you got? Why don't you give us your cons to working for the government, and then close us out for the day?
Okay. So again, I'm going to kind of rip Chris off a little bit here from one of his earlier comments, which is, it's a people thing. So you're going to have these micro kind of climates of culture within the organization. Some of them will have a very pro version. However, that's usually going to not be the case. You're going to mostly have a situation in which, in the government sector, you don't have people saying, hey, look, here's the next stage. This is what you need to do to get promoted. Here's a great opportunity. Here's an opportunity over here. You should really check that out within the organization. It's a bump up and this and that. So you're not going to really have that because they don't really care for the most part. They're just, nose down, bean counting, doing whatever they're doing and going home. Type of an environment. But again, there could be situations where it's not that way. For example, when I was in the government sector, I was not that way. I was, showing people jobs outside of my department and encouraging them to apply. And it's not because I didn't like them, it's because it was good for them. But I found that that was definitely not the norm within those organizations. So that con is a con. However, I believe that of any specific group to be in that environment, a veteran would probably be able to navigate that con fairly easily, as long as they know that it's a con. You can't sit there and wait for your senior NCO to say, hey man, you got to get up on this promotion board, right? It's not going to happen. So you got to just take charge, do it yourself, dig up the information you need, and keep your eye open. That's really that. And in addition, the income thing, I will touch on that real quick. The income piece, it could vary drastically from county to county as far as a government job is concerned. So you might just drive 20 miles over to another county and get if it's in California, we'll use California as the example since Chris is over there. The drastic dollar difference for the same job, just from one county to the other, could be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year difference, just because of where that county has that specific position put into their hierarchy and what they're calling that role and what have you. Also, remember that there's unions. A lot of unions are represented within the county. So with that, we'll kick it back to you, Randy. That's all I got for cons at this point.